In the middle of the 20th century, scientists around the world were obsessed with one question. A question so powerful that its answer would change biology, medicine, and humanity forever. That question was simple, yet mysterious. What carries the instructions of life? Everyone knew that something inside our cells controlled how we grow, how we look, and even how our bodies function. But no one knew exactly what it was or what it looked like. The race to discover the secret of life had begun. At that time, many scientists believed that proteins were responsible for inheritance. Proteins were complex and varied, while DNA seemed too simple to contain so much information. DNA was known, but it was underestimated. It was considered boring, just a long chemical molecule with no real importance. But not everyone agreed. In London, at King's College, a brilliant scientist named Rosalind Franklin was working quietly in her laboratory. She was an expert in X-ray crystallography, a technique that allowed scientists to take images of tiny structures invisible to the human eye. Franklin was precise, serious, and incredibly focused. She didn't rush her work, and she didn't share results until she was confident they were accurate. After months of careful experiments, she captured an image that would later become one of the most important scientific photographs in history. It was called Photo 51. At first glance, it looked like a strange pattern of dark spots, but to a trained eye, it revealed something extraordinary. The image showed that DNA had a helical structure, a spiral shape. It was the clearest evidence anyone had ever seen. Meanwhile, at the University of Cambridge, two young scientists were working on the same problem: James Watson and Francis Crick. They were ambitious, energetic, and impatient. Unlike Franklin, they didn't focus on experiments. Instead, they built physical models, trying to imagine the shape of DNA. They had ideas, but they lacked solid data. One day, without Franklin's permission, Photo 51 was shown to Watson by another scientist. The moment Watson saw it, everything clicked. He immediately understood what the image meant. DNA wasn't random. It wasn't flat. It was a double helix. Watson rushed back to Cambridge. Together with Crick, they began assembling a model at incredible speed. Using Franklin's data, though she wasn't fully credited at the time, they built the structure of DNA, two strands twisted around each other like a ladder, with chemical letters forming the steps. Those letters, A, T, C, and G, were the language of life. In 1953, Watson and Crick published their famous paper describing the double helix structure of DNA. The scientific world was stunned. The mystery of inheritance had been solved. For the first time, humans understood how genetic information is stored and passed from one generation to the next. But Rosalind Franklin did not share the celebration. She continued her research, unaware of how crucial her photograph had been to the discovery. A few years later, she died of cancer at the age of 37. At the time, the dangers of X-ray exposure were not fully understood. Her work had cost her life. In 1962, Watson, Crick, and another scientist received the Nobel Prize for the discovery of DNA's structure. Franklin's name was not included. Nobel Prizes are not awarded posthumously, and for many years her contribution was ignored or minimized. Only later did the world begin to recognize the truth. Today, DNA is at the center of modern science. It allows us to understand diseases, develop new medicines, solve crimes, trace ancestry, and even explore the possibility of editing genes. None of this would have been possible without the discovery of the double helix and without the careful, silent work of Rosalind Franklin. This story is not just about science. It is about curiosity, ambition, and the hidden cost of discovery. It reminds us that history often celebrates the loudest voices, while the most important work is sometimes done quietly, in the background. And it teaches us one final lesson: the truth always finds a way to be revealed, even if it takes years for the world to finally listen.